Hi everyone, I'm Miss Hughes.
And I'm Miss Lane, and we are students at the University of West Georgia, and we have for you our top 4 tips for becoming a successful educator.
Our first tip is the importance of communication.
Our next tip is that behavior isn't random, and then we will talk about motivation and engagement.
And our final tip is passion. The importance of communication. Communication is important in both personal and professional relationships. As a teacher, you utilize both of these personal and professional relationships with students, their parents, and your peers and admin. In our textbook, Educational Psychology by Seifert and Sutton, Chapter 9 touches on communication. By communicating effectively, it requires all forms of classroom talk. This is super important in a classroom. Appropriate talking in the classroom creates a safe place for students where they feel comfortable answering questions and sharing their thoughts. By creating a safe place for students, it allows trust to be built between the teacher and the students. In dealing with classroom communication, it also goes hand in hand with classroom management. By expressing your expectations clearly to students, it leaves no room for miscommunication. Making students feel comfortable all starts with the teacher. Communicate to parents and caregivers to know what's going on. Use technology like Class Dojo to have parents to see their child's progress.
Behavior isn't random. There's always some reason behind why a student behaves the way that they do. There's always a reason behind behaviors. Try and figure out what might be going on at home, or if your student has any type of diagnosis, such as ADHD, that might explain the behavior they're exhibiting. Different types of behavior will require different approaches. We'll talk more about this on the next slide. No two students act the same way for the same reasons. A way to figure out why a student is acting the way they are is to getting to know them, getting to know their home life, their family situation, all about them, and then that will help you figure out why they're acting the way that they are. Miss Hughes and I shadow at the same elementary school, and we had the opportunity to sit into a discussion given by the school behavior interventionist. She uses the acronym SEAT to explain some of the types of behaviors that occur in the school. Sensory can be too much or too little sensory input. If a student experiences too much sensory input, you could try and dim the lights or provide sound blocking headphones to help limit that sensory. If they have too little sensory input, providing them with stuffed animals, Play-Doh, or Pop-Its might be an easy solution. An example of sensory issue in the classroom might be a student consistently tapping on the desk. An alternative to this is tapping in the hand. That way it's not distracting other students, but they're still getting that sensory input that they desire. The E in C is for escape. They are uncomfortable in their current situation and want to get away. To help prevent unwanted behavior through the escape desire, you can provide an alternative task like running an errand to another teacher or giving them breaks throughout the lesson. Give them first, then alternatives like first, let's finish your reading lesson and then you can go to the bathroom, or giving them the option to what can I do to help you. Some students just require attention, whether it's positive or negative. They don't care what type, they just want attention. When you have students like this, try and outweigh reprimands with rewards. This is an example of operant conditioning, rewarding the behavior you want and ignoring the behavior you don't. Give them morning check-ins, and again, ignore the unwanted behavior after you've given an instruction. If they don't get the negative attention that they are desiring, then you're less likely to have that behavior in general. Tangible behavior is something that they just want to touch. They want to have a reward or to be able to see or feel something. So if they do what they're supposed to, you can give them candy or a toy or a water bottle, or you can have them fill out a reward chart with stickers so that way they are physically seeing and operating and participating in that reward system that they can both see and touch. Different students are motivated in different ways. It's important for the teacher to figure out what motivates their students so that way they can help them in the best way possible. Number 1, find the motivator. Figure out what motivates your students. The two main forms of motivation are intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Figure out which your student utilizes most often. Do they work for good grades, rewards, or so that they'll fit in with their peers? Number 2, incorporation. Figure out what your students are into, both in and out of school. Try and incorporate these things as often as possible in your lessons. The more often you include things that your students like, the more engaged they'll be. Number 3, attention. Make sure each student is included and seen. You'll have high and low achievers in your class. No matter what skill level your student is, make sure that you acknowledge them and their abilities.
Number 4, praise. Praise students for their achievements. This is huge in motivation and engagement. Celebrate your students. Give students incentives or positive reinforcements to help with motivation in the classroom. For example, if students meet their goals, reward them with a piece of candy or a trip to the prize box. Give students that reassurance that they are doing a good job. That is all a child needs at the end of the day. Number 5, gratification. The student and the teacher are both pleased by the end product. As a teacher, you must put in this extra time for your students. Allow students to think and to do hard things. The end result is so worth it. Seeing that growth in your students when they leave your classroom is so rewarding.
Many of these practices have been proven to be useful based on the research done by the authors of our textbook. Passion. Many teachers don't go into education for the money, as we all know. However, they do go into the field of education to make a lifelong impact on students and their lives.
Passion. Students follow by example. If you are excited to teach about fractions, then your students will be excited to learn about fractions. Fake it till you make it. Even if you don't love math and don't love fractions, pretend that you do. Most of the time, students dislike a subject. It's often tied back to a teacher's dislike of teaching that same subject. It is very common for teachers to burn out, especially in the first few years, so you have to love what you do in order to try and prevent this burnout early on. If you struggle with burnout, remember your why. Why did you get into education? Figure out what you may be struggling with that's causing you to burn out and make whatever change you can. You cannot help your students if you can't help yourself.
It all comes down to one thing. Building relationships is essential in all 4 of our main topic areas: communication, behavior, motivation and engagement, and passion. Students' connections with teachers are important. Almost every person has a teacher that they remember that had a long-lasting impact on their life. And more often than not, they had that impact because the teacher put in the work to build a personal relationship with that student. Relationships with students are essential because it allows students to feel comfortable communicating anything they might be struggling with both in and out of the classroom. You're building that trust and a bond with that student. It also enables you to decipher any type of behavioral issues that might be present in your classroom. You can jump to assumptions all you want, but unless you know what's going on with that student, you can't truly understand why they're behaving the way that they are. Building relationships also makes it possible to motivate and engage your students. You get to know what they like both in and out of school, if they're a baseball fan, if they ride horses, if they're into art, things like that that you would be able to incorporate into your lessons that you wouldn't otherwise know unless you put forth the effort to get to know your students. You're also able to cultivate a passion both for yourself and your students by developing relationships. If a student doesn't have a positive role model in the classroom, then they don't have someone to look up to and build that passion for whatever subject matter that they are learning about. Students might not know that they are into genetics if they don't have a teacher that is passionate about teaching genetics. Your passion carries on into students and can forever change their life and their career choices.
Building relationships with students is super important, but it's also super important to build the relationships with your team, with the people that work with you, to build that trust and build strong relationships.
At the end of the day, relationships both with teachers, admin, and your students, and even their parents, is what makes teaching possible.